first and foremost, I want to say congratulations and job well done to the Bay Area Council. Was that a great event they have here today? Thank you so much. My name is Jim Becker, Vice President for Okanite. I'm in charge of the Western United States for our company, and just wanted to share a couple of items that might be of interest to you about our company. Number one is we were founded in 1878. We were the very first company in the United States to ever make a piece of wire and cable. One of our very first clients ever was a gentleman by the name of Thomas Edison. But we're pretty unique today because 100 and some years later, we have 6 manufacturing plants, 100% in the United States of America, and we're really proud about that. Also, which is very interesting, is we are now 100% employee-owned, which is a neat way to run a business, so we're having fun with that. Most recently, we finished a major expansion at our Santa Maria, California plant, which is on PG&E turf, by the way, employs several hundred families. And it's a major expansion, and now we're so proud, though, to know that is the most modern, efficient wire and cable manufacturing plant in the world. It doesn't get much better than that. But I want to say that the timing, I think, is perfect for that, because one of the things that Mr. Earley might brief us on is one thing the industry, the United States, is really behind on, and that is our energy infrastructure is really old. And so I think our timing for the plant modernizations is just perfect. But before I bring on Mr. Earley, who is the chairman, CEO, and president of PG&E, I want to just give you a little background on this gentleman. He took over the reins of PG&E in September of last year, 1 year after the terrible disaster at San Bruno. So his team is obviously very involved in trying to work through that and improve as we move ahead. But he comes from Detroit Edison. And one thing about Tony Earley, he brings on 30-plus years of experience in the utility business, knows the nuts and bolts, and that's really what we need anymore. When he was a CEO of Detroit Edison, he transformed that company. It was a ho-hum company, and he transformed that utility into one of the best-run utilities in the United States, so much so that it was given a couple of great honors. One was best reputation for operations, which helps to keep the lights on. But the other one was one called the active role in helping communities. He really reached out to do that. But we are so fortunate to have Tony Earley, with his progressive leadership skills, now behind the PG&E force. One little bit of history that's kind of interesting, if you want to go back to a little trivia, Tony was the first ever CEO hired from outside of the company in their history. He's been a very active and involved individual. He was a past chairman of the Edison Electric Institute, the Nuclear Energy Institute, and the Henry Ford Systems. He is also on the current board of directors for the Ford Motor Company. So he's very involved. One last thing before I bring him out. I know there's maybe some rumors going around that there's a grudge that Mr. Earley has against Jim Becker. And I got to tell you what that's all about. Keep in mind, Tony is a graduate from Notre Dame University and the Notre Dame Law School. And it was 2001 when his team finally made it into the Fiesta Bowl to play my Oregon State Beavers. And they had a really tough time. So that's between us. Tony said there's no more grudge on that, even though, Tony, the score was 41-9, but we're over that. But I am very proud and honored to introduce the President, CEO, and Chairman of PG&E Corporation, Mr. Tony Earley.
I was going to thank Jim for that introduction to the last little bit, although I will remind him that Condoleezza Rice is also a Notre Dame graduate, so we can gang up on him backstage. I also want to thank the Bay Area Council for asking me to be part of this outstanding program this afternoon. Since I came to PG&E last fall, I mentioned to a lot of people that this move to the Bay Area felt a little bit like Back to the Future for me. 40 years ago, as a newly minted Navy ensign, Admiral Rickover selected me to join the Navy nuclear submarine program, and I was fortunate enough to spend time in Mare Island and San Francisco and San Diego. And for me, as a kid that grew up on the East Coast of the U.S., and I went to school in the Midwest, California was really a magical place. I discovered that there's a reason why people called and talked about the California dream. It had picture-perfect scenery, incredible weather, great food and wine, world-class universities, you name it, California was the land of opportunity. And so, swept up by that spirit of opportunity, I worked up the courage to propose to my college sweetheart on the North Overlook at the Golden Gate Bridge. And when she said yes, I really became convinced that in California anything was possible. So California and the Bay Area have always been special for Sarah and me. And in fact, a number of times in my career when recruiters would call up and they'd try and attract me to another company, my standard answer was, don't even call me unless it's the PG&E job. Little did I realize under what circumstances I would get that call. But moving back here 40 years later, I realized that a lot of the things that attracted so many to the Golden State are still here. But like PG&E, there are an awful lot of things we need to fix here. You know, California's fiscal challenges are well known. The prospects for the state's manufacturing sector are pretty grim. Unemployment in some of the communities that PG&E serves is shockingly high, even by the standards of someone who lived through the recession in Detroit. And changing these facts are going to require the wisdom, courage to do critical things to position California to thrive for the future. And I think with the possible exception of educating and investing in our young people, few things are as important as putting in place the foundations for a safe, reliable, and affordable energy future in our state. That means investing in clean energy and energy efficiency. It means investing to make the grid smarter. But at a most basic level, it means investing in core infrastructure. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit that energy infrastructure isn't something that really fires up a crowd. But the truth is, there is no more essential and more strategic asset for our future. And that's really true here in California, and it certainly is true for our nation. It's one of the golden threads that keep the fabric of our economy strong. It's a key ingredient in the competitiveness of every single one of our businesses. And it enables virtually everything that has come to define the quality of our life. And this was brought home to me during the Great Northeast Blackout in 2003. We were right in the middle of that in Detroit. About a quarter of the nation's customers were out of power. And it is something when you look out and see the whole economy grind to a halt. And this reliance is becoming even more important as our lifestyle and our economy move further into the digital age. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, well, of course the power is going to be there. That's just a given. But the reality is, it is not a given. The reality is America faces a serious energy infrastructure challenge. We urgently need to renew and revitalize our electric and gas networks to stay ahead of the curve as assets reach the end of their lifespan. We also need to be able to take advantage of new technologies that can provide more safety, more reliability, and more efficiency. So today I want to focus on why this is so important, why we have a great opportunity to get moving now, and also how we might be able to turn it to our advantage to help fuel a long-term, robust economic recovery in our state and in our communities. We're facing this challenge due to a number of factors. One is simply age. Half of our country's power plants are over 30 years old. Half of our electric distribution poles around the country are approaching 50 years old. Other components are similarly well-aged. Shockingly, by 2050, every single currently operating nuclear power plant in the U.S. will be beyond its licensed lifespan. That's 20% of the nation's power that won't be here just 40 years or so from now. In fact, much of America's energy infrastructure dates back to the post-World War II boom years as America grew, and that equipment is reaching the end of its useful life. Another factor is that relative to demand and economic growth, we've underinvested in our energy system over the past 20 years. Electric usage is up about 30% since the 1990s, but we haven't similarly increased the infrastructure. And there are lots of reasons for that. It relates to deregulation and the costs and cumbersome approval processes. The industry and regulators have opted for a minimalist approach. And while we've focused on running our systems smarter, which is a good thing, at the same time, we've also run them harder and longer than many of them were originally designed for. In a lot of cases, that means we've put stress on equipment. Eventually, this strategy reaches a point of diminishing returns, and it starts to come at a cost to reliability, and we pay a price for that. Various studies, including one by the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, have estimated that power outages cost the U.S. economy about $160 billion a year in lost productivity. Over this past 20 years, we've also seen the introduction of new technologies and a corresponding reliance on digital infrastructure. Now, we've got access to all this new hardware and software that we want to integrate into the grid to improve safety, reliability, and efficiency. But to take advantage of these innovations, we have to upgrade the underlying infrastructure. Otherwise, they're not going to help us. The smart grid is terrific, but the benefits will be short-circuited by the weak links in the system. Additionally, many businesses are becoming more sensitive to power quality. I mean, 20 years ago, small fluctuations in the grid weren't an issue. No one even noticed them. Nowadays, whether you're at a biotech firm or a high-tech manufacturer, any one of those minor glitches can shut down an entire production line for hours until it can be reset. And finally, another factor is that we have a need to have a more diverse energy supply and incorporate a greater presence of renewables on our system. This is obviously spurring investment in new generation. Some of that is distributed generation, which can actually help alleviate the infrastructure need by minimizing the need for new transmission. But many of the projects are solar and wind projects, both of which require additional support and infrastructure development. We're seeing the demand for new electric transmission to move renewable power from places like the Mojave Desert, where it's generated, to places like the Bay Area, where it's used. We also need more sophisticated control systems because renewable output is both unpredictable and uncontrollable, and you have to be able to manage the grid better. And finally, we're also seeing the need for new gas pipelines as many parts of the country focus on building new gas-fired power plants instead of new coal plants. A couple of years ago, the Edison Foundation commissioned a study to look at these trends, and it forecast that the U.S. needs to invest $1.5 to $2 trillion in infrastructure by 2030, and that's just in the electric sector. Major investments have to be made in the country's natural gas system. A lot of this is so the U.S. can take advantage of new domestic gas supplies, which deliver huge economic and energy security benefits. But another big driver is going to be public safety. 60% of the nation's gas pipelines are over 40 years old. And of course, that reality has been driven home by recent accidents in which age was one of the factors, most tragically here in San Bruno. Congress recently enacted new pipeline safety requirements, and some states, like California, are setting even higher standards, which our company fully supports. The bottom line is, if we fail to make these investments, we're jeopardizing our economic productivity, our ability to compete, and our ability to survive, and in some cases, we're threatening our safety. And we have to do this at a time when we need business to be generating the kind of sustained, broad-based growth that is essential to reversing current trends of unsustainable deficits and the current unemployment rate in some parts of our state. However, there is good news. We have two things working in our favor right now to help create a window of opportunity. One is that financing continues to be incredibly cheap. We can fund this growth much more affordably than we could at times in the past. Just a few weeks ago, PG&E issued $400 million of bonds at a record low interest rate. The other factor working for us is record low prices for natural gas. That means utilities and regulators have some breathing room within existing rates to fund at least a portion of the investments that are needed. And probably the best news is that by making these investments, it will represent a major potential source of job creation. One study estimates that modernizing and upgrading the electric transmission system alone could create an additional 150,000 to 200,000 jobs every year over the next 2 decades. Another study projects that investment in gas transmission could support an annual average of over 100,000 jobs. And that's over and above the long-term economic benefits that will accrue because of better safety, reliability, and efficiency. But in spite of the clear need and benefits, making these investments isn't a given, at least not on the scale and with the speed that we need to do them. The huge cost, the competing priorities, the regulatory complexity, all are obstacles for utilities, policymakers, and regulators. We can't dismiss those obstacles, but we cannot be derailed by them. We have to set our sights on the long run, and we have to find ways to move forward. We're going to need the courage to commit to a long-term vision so that we can plan effectively and know that these investments will be supported year in and year out. We're going to need to look closely at the existing rate structures and be open to changes that help alleviate the impact of these costs on our customers. My sense is that there is a growing consensus that California's tiered rate structure needs an overhaul. It is hurting business here in California. Similarly, we need to collaborate with policymakers at all levels to take a fresh look at the layers of requirements that have been built up over the years. And each of those requirements may have made sense in their time. But we need to look at them and ask ourselves the question, can we afford to do this and rebuild our infrastructure? Finally, I mentioned jobs. A few weeks ago, PG&E helped cut the ribbon at a new manufacturing plant near Sacramento that just opened to build low-emission trucks for PG&E. That created 100 new jobs. An infrastructure investment plan would create thousands of new jobs. To maximize the benefits, we need to coordinate public and private efforts to train local workers to gain the skills needed to be successful. PG&E has been doing this for a number of years now, working with local community colleges in a program we call our Power Pathway Initiative. And I'm confident we can find more opportunities like this to provide benefits to both businesses and our communities. Let me close with a thought from one of our speakers later in the day. President Clinton said it well at a Harvard Business Review article when he wrote, "Even in the economic downturn, firms are well positioned to help people and communities." And he called on companies to embrace this and apply it to our operations. He also said, "Short-term thinking got us into this mess, and long-term investments that benefit the world around us can lead us out of it." To which I'd add, we need energy infrastructure, we need jobs, the markets are offering us great opportunities to finance it, and all we need now is the will to work through the challenges and get it done. I know that PG&E and others in our industry are ready to make these investments. At our company, we plan to invest over $4 billion a year in new capital in each of the next several years. We're ready to work with our communities to optimize the benefits, and we're ready to partner with policymakers and regulators on a long-term vision for the state's energy infrastructure. The challenge may be daunting, but I believe we can get there by working together and committing to those changes. Thank you.
So, Tony, you make a compelling case that we need to invest in our energy infrastructure. I know I won't go home tonight or to work tomorrow and take my electricity usage for granted, but the costs you mentioned are staggering. So how do we afford all this? How can you make energy affordable and pay for all the things you mentioned?
Well, they are staggering. I mentioned the numbers being in the trillions of dollars. But what it will take is a multi-year plan. This isn't something that's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years. This is 10, 15, 20 years. But like your businesses, you need to plan for that. And so we need to set out a long-range plan and then stick to that plan as we go forward. It's like buying a house. Very few people pay for their house up front. They pay for it over time. Well, we have to pay for this infrastructure renewal over time. So that's the first thing we need to do. Second is this issue of reforming the rate structure in California. I mean, when I came here 7 months ago and saw that PG&E's highest rate was 38 cents a kilowatt hour, in Michigan it might be 10 or 11 cents, how can a state like California compete? Well, many of the elements of our rate structure were designed in past years to accomplish perfectly valid goals in the system, but today it just doesn't work. And so we need to take a look at how do we balance those rates to make it more attractive to businesses. We, in fact, just introduced an economic development rate proposal that will help communities where unemployment rates are very high in the state. And then third, all of us need to look at our own operations and make sure we take out of those operations unnecessary costs. And there are literally dozens and dozens of requirements on energy companies that were perfectly good when they were instituted that aren't necessary today. We need to take those costs out because we do need to get moving forward on this infrastructure renewal program.
So sounds like there's a lot of players here that you have to corral. How do you see the different roles for the utilities, the policymakers, the regulators, both state and local, working together to facilitate the kind of investment that you think is needed here?
Well, you have to start with education and get all of those constituencies aligned in the need for this infrastructure renewal. I will tell you that one of the big challenges that we have in California and many other states are term limits, because these are complex issues. But I think we need to have very aggressive efforts to talk about the long-term future of the state, because this program, it will go long beyond my tenure at PG&E and long beyond the governor's tenure and the legislature's tenure. We have to reach agreement that this is something we need to do as a state, and then we need to set out plans. The one bright spot, if there are any bright spots from the San Bruno tragedy, is it has focused on California on the need to invest in gas energy infrastructure. And the California Public Utility Commission is now starting to look at long-range plans for companies like ourselves and Sempra Energy. How are we going to renew this infrastructure to make it good for the next 100 years?
So I'm curious, this is clearly a national issue. So you came from Michigan, you're here in California. How do we stack up compared to some other areas of the country in terms of the state of our energy infrastructure here in California compared to others?
I think we have some challenges here for a couple of reasons. Given the tremendous growth of this state in the post-World War II, your 50s, 60s, into the 70s, that infrastructure has not really been renewed since then because it was all put in. So in the 80s and 90s, it was all pretty new. Well, now it's getting to be 50 or 60 years old, and we really do start to renew it. So that's one challenge. Second, the state really was derailed from 1995 on. If you think back, in 1995, the state was the first state in the union to start to enter into deregulation. I think it's fair to say that the deregulation experiment failed miserably first time out of the box. We were on the bleeding edge. It tripped into the California energy crisis, rolling blackouts. PG&E had to go through bankruptcy. Southern Cal Edison was a week from filing bankruptcy. And you look for, we lost a decade or so in terms of investment in infrastructure because of all of these diversions that all of the California utilities had to pay attention to. So I think we do have some challenges. On the flip side, I want to make sure that we use the wake-up call from the San Bruno gas explosion to say, infrastructure really does matter. And if you don't invest in it, sometime it's going to catch up with you.
I see we're running low on time here, so I'll ask you just one more question. You and your former company, Detroit Edison in Michigan, were known for focusing on economic vitality and helping the community. So how are you applying that experience here in your new role at PG&E?
You know, we're in a really unique industry. When I look out here in the audience, I bet if I asked you if you were one of my customers to raise your hand, everyone would be my customer. Maybe there's some out-of-towners. And so we have to be very cognizant that the success of a company like PG&E is intimately tied to the success of the communities we serve. I was in Fresno last Friday, and I was shocked at unemployment rates in that part of the state. And it doesn't help that community, and it doesn't help us. And so we've initiated a number of things. I mentioned an economic development rate that will focus on those communities that have high unemployment rates, that are economically stressed, to make it more attractive to expand your business there or to build your business there. Second, I talked before about the need to reform our rate structures so that businesses are attracted to the area so that we can build jobs. And then I think, third, this infrastructure development program will create literally thousands of really high-paying jobs. We're going to need lots of engineers and skilled technicians to carry it off. But if we do all of those things, I think companies like ourselves and Southern Cal Edison and Sempra really can be catalysts for improving the economy of California.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing your vision today, and you and your wife, Sarah, for moving from Michigan to California to help lead not just PG&E, but California and our nation back to its former glory and on the path to greatness in the energy sector.
Well, great.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Celeste.